Hello and welcome to the show. We start today with the Alfa Romeo 8C. This is, in my opinion, possibly the best looking modern car there is. Maybe the Eagle Speedster. That would probably be a pretty tough decision trying to pick between the pair of them. But I think the Alfa 8C is a fantastic looking vehicle. I like the sort of like the Lamborghini Veneno because it's suitably crazy, but I think the 8C is a far prettier car. However, I'm well aware that not everybody agrees with that. The 8C kind of divides people's opinions, really. It's you either love it or you hate it, I think. On the most part, yeah, if you like the car, you will probably really quite like it and rate it very, very highly. But a lot of people might not. I can understand why you won't. It's, in some respects, an odd-looking car. And I couldn't possibly try and explain to somebody who doesn't like this car why it looks good. It just can't be done. I don't think anybody can explain quite why this car works. But for me, it sort of just does. It's a bit of a strange one, I will say. But yeah, personally, I think the 8C is absolutely fantastic. However, I have seen many reviews of this car, of the real-life version of this car, and they all tend to say the same thing. Yes, it looks very good, yes, it sounds very good, and it has suitable sort of sports car speed, but the handling isn't really there. And in Forza 5, I kind of agree with them. I tentatively agree with them. There we go. It's a weird car to drive, this one. I've driven many cars in Forzas and Gran Turismos, etc. None of them quite drive like the 8C. Again, much like with the looks, I can't explain particularly well quite why this car is a bit weird to drive. Through the low-speed corners, the Alfa tends to have a little bit of understeer. Through the high-speed corners, it tends to have a bit of oversteer. At times, it can feel a little bit inconsistent. But at no point does it actually feel scary. It's a kind of an inconsistent car that you feel in control of, which is yeah, it shouldn't really work. It's a strange car to drive. Yeah, at no point did I ever think, oh god, we're going to have a really big crash with this car. At no point did I have any major offs. At no point did I spin the car or anything like that. You just feel like it's just weird. It's a weird vehicle to drive. Has strange handling characteristics on the car. The same can be said for the brakes. This car gets stopped very well. It's not exactly lightweight. I think about 3,400 pounds. It's not a massively lightweight vehicle, but it gets stopped incredibly quickly. But it doesn't. The brakes feel strange on this car as well. You slam on the brakes for some of the large stops, and there are a couple here at Silverstone. And it feels like the car is just on the edge of sort of letting go. It feels like it's moving around quite a lot under braking. I've never had a big crash with it. It never let go, but it feels like it's on the edge, but it's controllable on the edge, which it shouldn't be. Somehow you put it together, and the Alfa Romeo stays on the track. It takes some getting used to, sort of an acquired taste when it comes to the driving front. It's quite an agile car. It changes direction pretty well as we come up to the Maggotts and Beckett section. It's quite nice at some points in the track. The car's not too bad, and then other points it gets a little bit funny. Yeah, I can't really explain it much better than that. You'll have to drive it for yourself and see what I mean. An odd car to drive, this one. There is another downside. It is also a pretty big downside. That would be the price. The 8C is not cheap. 310,000 credits for what is essentially towards the top of B class. I would pay millions for this car just because I think it looks absolutely fantastic. But if you don't like the look of this car as much, it is very hard to justify by buying one of these based purely on the performance. I think with a little bit of tweaking from the standard model, you could get a very quick car from the Alfa Romeo 8C, but as it is, just not quite there. It is close, but not quite. And of course, there are many rivals to the 8C in the two-door sort of sports coupe category, and this would be one of them, the Jaguar XKR-S. This is a very different beast, and beast is probably the best word to describe this car than the 8C. The Jaguar is not subtle. I think Daniel would quite like this vehicle, if I'm honest. It doesn't do gently around a track, it has two settings. You can either try and get it around a track and you will be slow, or you can try a bit harder and you will be sideways and still be slow. It just, you can't drive this car sensibly. It just cannot do it. Trying to get this car around a racetrack properly without going sideways all the time is a little bit like asking Thor to hammer in a nail. It just doesn't work. It really, really does not work at all in this vehicle. I will be honest, I had quite a lot of fun with the Jaguar because you just chuck it around, it slides all over the place. It wasn't quick around Silverstone, but I had a laugh. It makes the Alfa sort of feel like a finely tuned Lotus. It does. The Jag does feel quite heavy. It slides around. It's an animal, really. That is the best way to describe this car. There are corners that I could take flat out easily in the Alfa Romeo. You just can't do that with the Jaguar. It doesn't have the rear end grip. It's not too bad on the turn in front. Some of the high speed corners, it isn't that bad. Through Maggers and Beckett's, it's not too bad. But any corner where it involves putting the power down from a low gear, you will either spin the wheels up and go manically sideways, or you have to be so careful on the throttle you lose a huge amount of time. The Jaguar is not at all an easy car to drive, or I should say it's not an easy car to drive fast around a track. You can mess around with the car and have a lot of fun with it, but actually trying to get it around the track quickly, it doesn't really work particularly well. On the statistics front, the Jaguar does have the Alfa quite firmly beat. Horsepower in the Jag is 542 to the Alfa Romeo's 450. It's got quite a lot of power. It's got 150 more torques than the Alfa Romeo as well, with 501 in the Jag. Does weigh a little bit more, about 400 pounds heavier than the Alfa Romeo, but the power of the Jag can overcome that. This final corner here, flat out in the Alfa, doesn't work. It's just sideways in the Jaguar. 0 to 60 wise is actually a little bit quicker in the Alfa, 4.1 to the Jag's 4.2. I think that's because the Alfa actually sort of has traction. The Jag will just sit there and spin and spin and spin. But once it gets to the 0 to 100 time, the Jag 8.5 to the Alfa's 9.2. Top speed of the Jaguar, 205 miles an hour, which is quicker than I expected from it. If I'm honest, I didn't realise this car was quite that fast in a straight line. But of course, round the corners, it really does struggle if you're trying to be sensible, shall we say. Again, that's another corner, fairly straightforward in the Alfa. In the Jaguar, it's a completely different story, really. And there is always the inevitability of this. I can guarantee you will end up having a silly spin with the Jag. There is no doubt about it. You will turn into a corner, you will put down a little bit too much power, things will be going okay, and then they're not going okay, and then you're pointing the way you just came. It is inevitable you will do something silly like that with the Jag at some point. It's just the way the car drives. However, it is now time to hand both of these over to our racing driver to see what he can do and if he can keep the Jaguar from pointing the wrong way. As I said, statistically they are fairly similar. There's only one PI difference between these two. Off the line, the Alfa does get a slightly better launch, but by the time they get to the first corner, it is pretty close between the pair of them. The Alfa is actually getting a little bit out of shape out of turn 1 up towards the second corner, and they are still very, very close on the track. They were closer than I thought they would be as well at this point. I thought the Alfa might pull away from the Jag, but still around the next corner, the Alfa can just put a little bit more power down, I think, coming down the back straight. It's just got a small amount of a lead coming up towards the hammerhead. The Jag can pull it back a little bit on the straight as they come into the hammerhead. The Alfa has now got just a little bit more of a gap, and then comes the big noticeable change. On the exit of the hammerhead, the Jaguar just can't put the power down. It's very bumpy through there, and the Jaguar, you just can't use the power in the Jag the same way that you can with the Alfa Romeo. So by the time they get to the tyre wall, the Alfa's got a fairly big gap over the Jag. Both cars are pretty damn quick still in a straight line as we head up towards the second to last corner now for the Alfa Romeo. It's got a fairly sizable gap back to the Jaguar. Jaguar's not lost anymore though as they round the final corner and across the line for the pair of them. yeah, as you can see, it was a fairly straightforward real victory for the Alfa on this one, with a 120.3 a second quicker than the Jag. But the Jag lost pretty much all of that 1 second leaving the hammerhead. The slowest corner on the track, just trying to put the power down in the Jaguar, is what killed it. Near enough. At a higher speed track, I think the pair of them would probably be a little bit closer, provided that track didn't have any sort of really slow corners for the Jaguar to sort of trip up on. Anyway, out of the pair of these cars, I would undoubtedly have the Alfa 8C based purely on the looks of the car. It is an awful lot of money, and performance-wise it is quite hard to justify as it isn't the best to drive. I think with a bit of work I could make an 8C a very, very good car, but standard-wise it's a strange one. I recommend you give it a go, see if you agree with me. It's just something not quite there. The Jag is good fun. There is no doubt about it. The Jag is great fun to mess around with. It is not so good for trying to drive seriously around a track. It really can't cope with it. Good for a laugh, but not much more. Not much more than that. However, that is it for this video, guys. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.